The last video in the playlist looked at this algorithm for reading from a file, and it showed the steps that you needed to go through. So you would first of all open the file for reading, then you would read the file, you would then process it in some way, and then you would close the file to release the resources that were set aside when you open the file. So what we have is the following. We have the Python code that will work with the operating system, where the operating system has a relationship with the text file that we're going to read. Let's now consider the Python code which is coming into view, and also the content of the text file which is coming into view. If we look to the text file, you can see that it's got two lines. The first line is saying I am the content of a text file. The second line is saying I can be read by a human and easily understood, because that really defines a text file. And if you look here, the name of the file is my textfile.txt, and you can see I've reflected that name here in the diagram. If we look to the Python code which is here, you can see that it has 4 lines. If we look at the 4 lines, the first one implements step 1 of the algorithm, which is to open the file for reading. The next one is where we read the file, and then we process. Now, in the case of this example, I'm not really processing any data. I'm simply going to be printing the data out onto the screen so we can see that the file has been read appropriately. And then, of course, we have to close the file. And we close the file to release any resources that were set aside when we first opened the file. And I talked about resources in a little bit of detail in the previous video in this playlist. Before I go on to discuss the Python program in a little bit more detail, I think I should point out right now that for the program I've produced, the Python code and the text file have to be in the same folder, or in old money we say the same directory. If the text file is not in the same directory, then you have to give the full path to where the text file resides in the computer's file system. So you may want to do a little bit of background reading about paths and folders to ensure that you're understanding what I've just discussed. So let's home in on the computer program and the text file, and we're going to look to this first line of the program. And what you can see is it's saying open my textfile.txt. Now this is the name of this file here, and you note that it is in quotes. Now that's to ensure that you follow the syntax. You need these quotes. Then you can see there's a comma, and then in quotes we've got a 1-character string that has the letter R within it, lowercase r. Now that means that this text file is going to be open for reading, and reading only. It means you won't be able to write to this file, you'll be able to read it. And it is also important to note that this has an assignment to my file. Now my file is going to be an object to which we can send messages. Now I'll look at this with respect to the diagram that we've already seen in this video, which is coming into view now. Let's turn our attention to this line and what it does when it executes with reference to this diagram. We are going to see on the diagram there is 2 things going to appear. One is the resources, and the other is the stream from the text file to the Python code, and you can see that appearing now. Now the resources are effectively a file descriptor which says how the file can be handled by Python, and this is in effect memory set aside to allow you to gain access to the file in the way in which you want that access to be. And of course we already know that when we finish with the file, you close the file, which will release these resources. But we have also got this here, which is called a stream, and it is a connection between the text file and the Python code. Now, if we consider the diagram, we know we have this connection, And this connection is going to have the name my file. And the reason it has that name is because this is a reference to an object, and the object reference is here in the program code. So when we refer to the stream, we know it is an example of an object. And indeed, because it's an object, it is an instance of a class. And this stream will be the instance of a particular class that I'm not going to cover here. But what I will say is that class will have defined within it things that you can do with the object. And one of the things you can do with this object is you can tell it that you wish to read, because it will have a method that allows you to read the text file. And if I come to the program code, you can see that this is the message here, and that's the message to this stream. And I'm going to be invoking this method. And of course, what this will do is read from this text file. I'll remove these two labels and turn my attention to this line in a little bit more detail. We know this is going to be a message that will invoke the reading of the file. And let's look to the diagram, and we can see that the data is brought into the program code. And when it's brought into the program code, it is assigned to this variable here. So this variable will now be holding the content of this file. And of course, in this file, we have got, I am the content of a text file. I can be read by a human and easily understood. So when this line executed, a copy of what's in this text file has been transferred to the Python code and stored in this variable. Now, if we look to this program statement, this is where we would normally put the processing of the data that we've just read. Now here, I'm not really processing the data other than displaying it on the screen. So when this line executes, what we're going to see displayed is what's coming into view now. And if you read it, you can see it says, I am the content of a text file. I can be read by a human and easily understood. And if you look at this, you can see it's identical to what was in this file. So you can see that this line correctly read all of the contents of the file, stored it here, and this line simply printed the content to this position when the program was executed. This is the program statement that executes next. And if you look at it, you can see we've got here my file. Now that is the reference, the object reference to the object that was created on this line. And of course, the object is this stream. And because it is an object, it will have methods. And the method I'm choosing to use is this here, which is the close method. So what this line will do is close the file. Consequently, it'll free up these resources, and this stream will also be removed. So if you look to the diagram for a moment, you will see that when this line executes, the resources and the stream are removed. Now, if you look to the diagram again, you can see that there is now no connection between the Python code and the text file that's called my textfile.txt, because we've closed the file, and that link, that stream, has been removed and the resources have been freed. If you do not want to think in terms of classes, objects, messages, methods, you can simply look at this computer program and say that the first line has opened the file for reading. This then will read the contents of the file and then assign those contents to this variable. You're then simply printing the contents out so you can view them to see if they're the same as what was in the file, and then you have to remember to close the file in order to free up resources. So here you can see I've got the file name that I'm opening for reading, and I'd like to finish on the fact that because I've only got the file name here, you have to ensure that the code and the text file are in the same folder, or if you like to call it, the same directory. If you didn't have the text file in the same directory, you have to put here the path to where the file is in the file structure, and it'll work in exactly the same way. You're just telling Python where the file is in the file system. If you don't give it a path, Python will look in the directory where the program is saved. And by directory, I also mean folder.